So example number 3. We've got r squared plus 3r minus 1 equals 0. Okay, so I look at this and once again I say, well, this sign is not positive, so this is not a perfect square trinomial. But what if, just pretend, I had, I had 3r plus 1 equals 0. Well, now that is a plus, so maybe it's a perfect square trinomial. The even square root of r squared is r. The even square root of 1 is 1. And remember, I need my middle term, so I multiply those two together. 1 times r is 1r, times 2 gives me 2r. But that's not what this is, so it still isn't a perfect square trinomial. So now let me set up my 2 steps, get this ready to go, plus, because this guy's plus, and then 3r plus, because in a perfect square trinomial, that one's always plus, plus because I added this guy to the other side, plus because I have to keep my equation in balance. And then the second step, getting this ready to go as a perfect square trinomial, and plus because this guy's plus, and equals. Okay, so now I'm ready to go. This guy first. So take 3 and divide him by 2. What do you get? Guys, don't make this any harder than this is. If the number that you are dividing by 2 does not divide evenly, then just put that number over 2. Don't turn it into 1.5 or 1 1/2 or anything else. Just leave the numerator and put it over 2. That's it. Now, of course, take this and square it. So 3 squared is 9. 2 squared is 4. And this guy just comes straight over here. Oh, now how am I going to add 1 plus 9/4? Stop for just a second and see if you can get this. Try the answer and then come back and see how you did. Well, guys, 1 plus 9/4, this is 2 fractions basically needing to be added. How do I turn this guy into a fraction? I put him over 1. I need an LCD. My LCD is 4. So I need to multiply this guy by 4. If I do it in the denominator, I need to do it in the numerator. My denominator is 4, and 4 plus 9 is 13, so I get 13/4. Okay? Make sure you know how to do that. Now I'm ready to use my square root property method, because this is in the proper format. Now, I'm going to give you 2 pieces of advice here. I give this to everybody every semester, and nobody ever takes this advice. So you be the first one to take this advice, okay? Whenever you have a fraction on the right side, always split it up. It will make your life way easier. That's a piece of advice number 1. Piece of advice number 2 is always make sure you do everything on the right side that can possibly be done before you start bringing anything over from the left side. That's the one that people miss a lot. So now this and this match, so this falls out as my answer. So plus 3/2 equals plus or minus the square root of 13. Well, I can't do anything with the square root of 13, but I can do something with the square root of 4. That's 2. Now, I look at the right side. There is not anything more I can do with it. So now I can go ahead and subtract this guy and bring him over here. So r equals -3/2 plus or minus the square root of 13 over 2. Okay, and because these are both common denominators, I'm just going to write it over one denominator. This is how I want it written. Please do it like this, not like the book does. Now let's just take a minute and pretend here. Okay, let's say that we got -3/2 plus or minus the square root of 13 over 4. And this was correct, okay? I have to write it over one common denominator. Well, my common denominator here is going to be 4. That means I need to change this guy to 4. How do I do that? I'm going to multiply him by 2. If I do that in the denominator, I need to do it in the numerator. And so then I get -6 plus or minus the square root of 13 over 4. Again, write it like this, not like the book does. Okay, still pretending. Let's say we got -3 over 4 plus or minus the square root of 13 over 2. And again, you have to write it over one common denominator. So again, our common denominator is going to be 4. Yes, 4. But this time, we're going to have to multiply this guy by 2 to make him 4. And if I do that in the denominator, I need to do it in the numerator. And so now my denominator is 4. And think about, stop this for just a second and see if you can get the right answer in the numerator. Come back and see how you did. -3 plus or minus 2 times the square root of 13. We can't multiply the square root of 13 times 2 in any other way because it's not the square root of 2, it's just 2. And this would be our final answer. Okay, so I got another one and then one for you to try. So t squared plus 6t plus 10 equals 0. Okay, so this is a positive. Let's see if maybe it's a perfect square trinomial. The square root of t squared is t, and the square root of 10 is? There is not a square root of 10. So I'm going to have to set up my 2 steps. 6t plus here because this guy's plus. Plus, not because this one's plus, but because in a perfect square trinomial, this second sign is always plus. Now, how did I end up with a negative on this side? Well, when I move this guy to the other side, its sign changes, but I still am adding in my blank here something that I don't know what it's going to be, so I have to add it on the other side to keep it balanced. And now I'm going to set up my second step, getting ready for my perfect square trinomial, equals, and then this. So, take this guy, divide him by 2, that's 3. Take this guy, square him, that's 9. Take him, just put him right over here. Now take a second, turn this off, figure out what this is. Come back and see if you got it right. -1. Okay. Now I'm ready to use the square root property method. Plus 3 squared equals plus or minus the square root of -1. That leaves me t plus 3 equals plus or minus. Stop this again. See if you can get the right answer. This is a even index. It's a 2 with a negative underneath. So I take that out. It becomes I, right? So then I have t plus 3 equals plus or minus, and the square root of 1 is 1, and 1 times I is I. And so now I just need to subtract this from both sides. Make sure you're pushing them up between the equals and the plus and minus, and we get t equals -3 plus or minus I. So we get all kinds of different answers, but every time we got 2 answers. This one, t equals -3 plus I, t equals -3 minus I. Make sure you know all these different scenarios because you're going to get them all. Okay? So now, your turn. I want you to try this. Bring it into class, work with your group, see if you can all get it, Ultimately, you need to show it to me and see if you get the right answer. When you can get the right answer here, then you will be doing really good. Now, one thing I did forget to tell you, okay? If our x squared has any number in front of it at all, because we cannot do this completing the square unless the number that's in front of this x is a 1, okay? So if there's any number in front of that, then we need to divide that out. But if you do it with him, you have to do it with this guy, and you have to do it with this guy, and technically with this guy. That would be your very first step always, okay? Because when you start to do a completing the square, this guy, the squared term, has to have a 1 coefficient, okay? All right, so here's yours. 3t squared plus 6t plus 10 equals 0. Now, you go ahead and try this, see how you do, bring it to class, work with your classmates, but ultimately you need to show it to me and see if you end up with the correct answer. Have fun.